My name is Harold Whitcomb, and I was 68 years old when my daughter decided my life needed a new address. It happened at my own dining table. The one I'd refinished myself back in '92 when Melissa was still in braces and Derek kept carving his initials into the underside with a butter knife. Solid oak, heavy, the kind of table that doesn't wobble even when the conversation does. We were halfway through dinner, meatloaf, green beans, the same meal Alina used to make on Sundays. No candles, no ceremony, just forks scraping plates and the low hum of the refrigerator. Melissa dabbed her mouth with her napkin and said, like she was commenting on the weather, "Dad, we're putting you in a home next week." No warning, no soft lead-in, just like that. I remember the sound more than the words, the clink of Derek's fork hitting his plate, Janine's wine glass settling back onto the coaster. Nobody looked at me. They all stared at the center of the table like the decision had already been carved into the wood. I didn't shout, didn't ask what she meant, didn't laugh, though a part of me almost did, because I was sitting in the house I paid for, eating food I bought at a table I built, listening to my children discuss my future like I wasn't even in the room. I took a bite, chewed slowly, let the moment stretch. Melissa reached into her bag and slid something across the table toward me, a glossy brochure. She pushed it with two fingers, the same way waiters slide dessert menus when they're proud of the selection. Sunridge Assisted Living, she said. It's very nice, clean, secure. They specialize in transitions. Transitions. I looked down at the brochure, smiling gray-haired couples on park benches, a man about my age pretending to laugh at something a nurse said, big windows, neutral colors, prices listed in neat columns like cable packages. Derek cleared his throat. It's not cheap, Dad, but you'll be comfortable. You'll not will, that word hung there. Janine nodded, her lips pressed tight in what she probably thought was compassion. It's for the best, less stress, less responsibility. Responsibility, they talked around me, over me, through me. Monthly costs, wait lists, amenities, as if I were a piece of furniture they were debating whether to reupholster or replace. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked how I felt. Melissa leaned back in her chair. We've already spoken to a placement advisor. There was an opening, we didn't want to lose it. I finally looked up at her, really looked, perfect hair, confident posture, the face of someone who believed the math had already been done. What opening? I asked. She waved a hand. The room, don't worry about the details. That's when I noticed something else, not fear, not concern, relief. They'd already moved past me in their minds, already pictured the house quieter, the assets simpler. The timeline shorter. They thought this was settled. They thought the trust was still locked. I folded the brochure once. Then again, the paper was thick, expensive. Well, I said calmly, that's thoughtful. Melissa smiled. Derek exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Janine took a sip of wine. They mistook my silence for surrender. Before I tell you how I dismantled their perfect little plans from a distance they never saw coming, take a second, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story, it's personal. I nodded politely because I already knew something they didn't. Derek laughed first. It wasn't a loud laugh, more like a puff of air through his nose, the kind people use when they think they're being charming. Hey, he said, glancing at Melissa. At least this way we won't have to worry about Dad wandering off someday and ending up at a gas station 2 towns over. He smiled like he'd just told a harmless joke. I didn't laugh. Neither did Melissa, though she didn't correct him. She just adjusted her napkin and kept her eyes on her plate. Janine let out a soft chuckle, the kind that doesn't take sides but still lands where it's meant to. That's not fair, Janine said, half-hearted. But you do forget things sometimes, Dad. I set my fork down. Like when? I asked. She hesitated. Well, you forgot Derek's birthday last year. Derek shrugged. It's fine, I mean it happens. What he didn't say was that I'd called him the day before, left a voicemail. He never called back. Melissa leaned forward. And the car thing, remember? I frowned. What car thing? She exchanged a look with Derek like they were rehearsed. You told us you couldn't find your keys for 2 hours. You said you thought someone broke in. That's not what happened, I said slowly. I found them in the garage where I always leave them. Well, she replied, that's not how you told it. Janine tilted her head, studying me like a nurse assessing a patient. And you repeat stories, Dad, you told. The same one about the Johnson job 3 times last Thanksgiving. I stared at her, because you kept interrupting me. Silence, they kept going anyway, small stories, convenient ones, each one sanded down just enough to make me sound unsteady. A missed appointment that had been rescheduled, a name I'd paused on before remembering, a wrong turn I corrected in under a minute. By the time they were done, the man they were describing barely resembled me. He was fragile, confused, slipping. I looked at my hands resting on the table, still steady, still strong enough to rebuild a deck if I wanted to, strong enough to hold a pencil, sign my name, make decisions. So when did that authority leave the room? When did I become a problem instead of a person? Melissa sighed like she was tired of carrying something heavy. We're not saying you're incapable, just not what you used to be. I felt something tighten in my chest. I run my own finances, I said. I drive myself, I cook. I pay bills on time. For now, Derek said quickly, that's the point. Then Janine spoke again, softer this time. It's what Mom would have wanted. The words hit harder than anything else that night. Aliner's name settled over the table like dust, untouchable, final. Melissa nodded immediately. She worried about you, Dad, you know that. I looked at my children, all three of them suddenly aligned, and felt something shift deep inside me. When did Aliner stop being my wife? And start being their weapon? I didn't argue, but I didn't forget that question either. The first time Aliner warned me, she could barely lift her hand. It was late afternoon in the hospice room. The kind of hour where the light turns soft and everything feels like it's holding its breath. The blinds were half open, and a thin stripe of sun lay across her blanket, right where her knees used to be before the weight dropped off her. I was sitting beside her bed, reading the same page of the newspaper for the third time without turning it. The room smelled like antiseptic and chamomile tea. Machines hummed quietly as if they were afraid to interrupt us. She reached for me. Her fingers were thinner than I remembered, but her grip was still firm. Aliner never did anything halfway. Harold, she said, her voice rough but clear, promise me something. I leaned closer. Anything. She didn't smile. That's what told me this mattered. They're going to be kind to you with their words, she said, but not with their actions. I frowned. The kids, she nodded once. They love you in their way, but they love comfort more. I wanted to argue. I didn't. She squeezed my hand tighter. When I'm gone, she continued, they'll start counting time, money, rooms in the house. That's not fair, I said. It's honest, she replied. Then she said the part I didn't want to hear. Protect the estate, she whispered. Even from blood if you have to. The words landed heavy between us. I don't want them fighting, I said, and I don't want you erased, she shot back, a flash of the woman I married, sharp, cert. She shifted slightly, wincing, then looked straight at me. Promise me you won't hand everything over just to keep the peace. I swallowed. I promise. She relaxed then, just a little, her hand loosened in mine. Good, she said, because they'll try to make it sound like they're helping. That night after she fell asleep, I went home and opened the cabinet in my study where the trust binder sat untouched for years. Thick, black, heavy enough to hurt if you dropped it on your foot. I didn't open it then. I wasn't ready. Inside that binder, tucked behind the legal language and notarized pages, was a folded piece of yellow paper Aliner had slipped in years earlier. Her handwriting, tight and slanted. I found it months later. 2 sentences. If you're reading this, it's already started. Choose dignity over guilt. Sitting at the dining table now, listening to my children tell stories about the man they decided I was, I finally understood. This moment wasn't a surprise, it was anticipated. I hadn't been blindsided, I'd been warned. And 2 months earlier, when the house was quiet and no one was watching, I finally opened the binder. I was supposed to be at brunch. Melissa had texted me the night before, don't be late. We need to talk timelines. No question mark, just a period. Instead, I parked my car in front of a low brick building wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax prep office. No sign bigger than a shoebox, just black lettering on frosted glass, ROEMER and Associates, estate law. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, listening to it tick as it cooled. No music, no nerves. Just a strange sense of calm, like stepping into deep water after you've already held your breath. Calvin Romer opened the door himself. He was 71, maybe 72. Thin as a fence post, with white hair that refused to stay combed. We'd known each other for decades, back when he handled contracts for my construction business and never once missed a comma. Harold, he said, shaking my hand. You look alert. I smiled. I feel that way too. His office smelled like old paper and lemon polish. No diplomas on the walls, just framed photos of hiking trails and a crooked painting a grandchild had probably made. We sat. He didn't rush me. I told him everything. The dinner, the brochure, the jokes. The way my own children had started narrating my decline like a story they'd already memorized. Calvin listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he leaned back and said, let's talk about what's actually locked and what is. He opened the trust binder I'd brought with me, flipping pages like he'd written them himself. Your revocable trust, he said, tapping the paper, is still revocable. You're competent. You've never been declared otherwise. That means you can amend beneficiaries, restructure conditions, and he paused, adjust control of the deed. I raised an eyebrow. Adjust how? He slid a document across the desk. Your properties, the house, the rentals, the land in Mercer County, total valuation conservatively just over $9 million. I let that number sit there. Income streams alone, he continued, are enough to support you comfortably for the rest of your life, assisted living or not. Means any argument about necessity is thin. So they can't force anything, I said. They can try, he replied, but only if you let them. We talked for nearly 2 hours, language, clauses, safeguards, the difference between access and ownership, between care and control, no raised voices, no drama, just decisions. When we were done, Calvin closed the binder and looked at me carefully. What you're considering, he said, will protect you, but it will also change how they see you. I nodded. Already changed how they see me. He studied me for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Are you ready for them to hate you?" Brent Holloway shook my hand without looking at my face. His grip was quick, professional, already moving on. His eyes were fixed over my shoulder, scanning the hallway like he was late for something more important than me. "Mr. Whitcomb," he said, voice smooth, "welcome to Sunridge." The lobby smelled like lemon disinfectant and fake flowers. Everything was beige. Walls, chairs, carpet. Even the people seemed toned down, like someone had turned the saturation knob too far to the left. Melissa walked beside me, her heels clicking with purpose. Derek lagged behind, scrolling on his phone. Janine carried a folder stuffed with printouts, like she was attending a meeting instead of touring the place she planned to park her father. Brent launched into his script as we walked. "Independent living starts at $3,800 a month," he said. "Assisted care depends on needs. Medication management, meals, housekeeping, those are bundled. Memory care?" Melissa asked. Brent nodded. "That's a separate wing." He glanced at me then, just long enough to assess, to sort me. "He's still pretty lucid," Melissa added quickly, lowering her voice even though I was right there. "For now." Brent smiled. "Of course." We passed a woman staring at a television that wasn't on, a man in a wheelchair humming to himself. Nurse gently redirecting someone who'd wandered into the wrong hallway. I caught my reflection in the glass of a framed landscape, still standing straight, still clear-eyed. Derek stopped near a display case of brochures. "So what's the difference between the silver and gold plans?" Brent pointed. "Gold includes priority medical response and upgraded dining." "Worth it," Derek said, nodding. "If you're gonna do it right." Like he was buying luggage or a phone plan, they talked numbers monthly. Annual deposits, refundable portions, non-refundable portions. No one asked me if I liked the place. No one asked if I wanted to leave my neighborhood, my porch. The oak tree a leaner and I planted the year Melissa was born. We walked past a window overlooking a courtyard. A few residents sat silently, facing the sun like it might tell them something. I remembered my backyard, summer barbecues, laughter. Eleanor yelling at Derek for sneaking beer. Janine dancing barefoot on the deck. Melissa arguing about college, life, loud and messy, and mine. Brent stopped at a door. This would be a standard unit. He opened it, a bed, a chair, a small dresser, no kitchen, no bookshelves, no history. "This would be yours," Melissa said, smiling tightly. I stepped inside, counted 3 paces from wall to wall. I imagined my life shrinking to fit that rectangle. Brent pulled out a clipboard. "If you're ready, we can get the paperwork started." I looked at the pen in his hand. Then I looked at my children. I didn't reach for it. I didn't sign anything. I just handed the clipboard back and said, "I need time." And for the first time that day, the room went quiet. "Why are you being difficult?" Melissa didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The words were sharp enough on their own. We were back in my driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house loomed behind us, familiar and suddenly fragile, like something already being measured for sale. "I'm not being difficult," I said. "I asked for time." She crossed her arms. "Time for what? You saw the place. It's good, clean." "Safe for who?" I asked, her jaw tight. "For you." Derek shut his door a little too hard. "Dad, this doesn't need to be a whole thing." I looked at him. "It became a thing when you decided without me." Janine sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're making this harder than it has to be." That's when it clicked. Every explanation I offered, every defense, every clarification just gave them more material, more stories to twist, more proof that I was confused, resistant, emotional. So I stopped explaining. "I said I need time," I repeated. "That's all." Melissa stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You're not listening." I held her gaze. I just don't agree." She shook her head. "This is exactly what Mom was afraid of." I didn't respond. They left soon after, frustration trailing behind them like exhaust. I stood on the porch and watched their cars disappear down the street, one by one. That night I made myself a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table in silence. No television, no radio, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the house settling around me. I was washing my plate when I heard Derek's voice. He was outside on the side yard, phone pressed to his ear. I didn't mean to listen, but the window was open. "Yeah," he said low. "Once he's placed, it's easier. We can start liquidating after placement." I froze. He paced. "No, not right away. We'll ease into it. The house is the big one." My hands gripped the edge of the sink. "Trust stuff is still the same," Derek continued. Melissa checked. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. They weren't worried about my care. They were planning my exit. Later, alone in my study, I opened the drawer where I'd tucked Calvin's card. I held it between my fingers, feeling the raised lettering. I didn't feel angry, I felt clear, and that's when I made my second move. Marissa Cole stopped mid-sentence. Her finger hovered over the page, lips parted slightly, eyes narrowing as she reread the paragraph in front of her. The room went quiet except for the low whir of the air vent. "I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly," she said finally. I sat back in the leather chair, hands folded in my lap. "Take your time." She looked up at me then, really looked. Not like Brent had, not like my children did when they were already writing my ending in their heads. She looked at me like a man who knew exactly why he was there. We were in a conference room on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown. Polished table, frosted windows, water pitcher untouched. Marissa was the trust officer assigned to my accounts. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, neutral expression that didn't give much away. She'd been calm and efficient right up until she hit the addendum. "So," she said slowly, "you're converting the trust from a simple beneficiary distribution into a conditional structure." "Yes, and access to principal is now contingent on documented involvement in your care," she continued, scanning the page. "Not assumed, verified, yes." She flipped another page. "And you've added a clause that suspends distributions entirely if any beneficiary attempts to place you in a care facility without your written consent or a court order." I nodded. "That's correct." Marissa leaned back slightly, exhaling through her nose. "This is thorough," she said. I couldn't help it. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, the conversation wasn't about what I couldn't do. It wasn't framed around decline or risk or urgency. It was about intent. Marissa straightened the stack of papers. "Everything here is legal, clear. Frankly, it's refreshingly specific." She met my eyes again. "You understand this will shift leverage." "I do." "And that your children will notice." "I expect them to." She nodded once, respectful, not pitying, respectful. We went over signatures, dates, initials. My hand didn't shake, my name came out clean and even the same way it always had. When we were done, Marissa gathered the documents into a folder. "Would you like copies sent to the beneficiaries now?" she asked. "Or would you prefer—" "I'd like a meeting," I said. She paused. "All together?" "Yes, everyone present." A flicker of something crossed her face. Surprise, maybe, or anticipation. "Very well," she said. "I'll coordinate with your attorney." She stood and offered her hand. As I shook it, I felt something settle into place. The story they'd been telling about me was about to change, and this time I'd be in the room when it did. The first sign came in an email, not to me, about me. Melissa had accidentally included me on a thread titled "Post-Placement Renovation Ideas." I read it twice just to be sure. Paint samples, flooring options, a contractor Derek knew from work. Notes about opening up the primary bedroom and repurposing the study. My study. The room where I'd balanced checkbooks, signed contracts, and held Aline's hand when the house felt too quiet after the kids moved out. No one had asked. By the time Melissa realized I was on the thread, the email was already sent. She followed up with a quick "sorry, wrong recipient." Like that fixed anything. A week later, I overheard them in the hallway. They thought I was in the shower. I was. I was standing at the top of the stairs, towel over my shoulder, listening to my own future being rearranged. "If we knock down this wall," Derek said, "we can turn his bedroom into a sitting area." "Or a guest suite," Janine added. "No offense, but his bed is huge." Melissa laughed softly. "We'll need a tape measure." I watched from the shadows as Derek pressed the end of a yellow tape against the wall of my bedroom. The metal hook scraped lightly over the frame of a photo hanging there. Aline and me. Laughing, covered in sawdust. Mid-renovation years ago. The tape stretched across the wall, passing right over her face. Something tightened in my chest, not anger. Resolve. They weren't waiting for me to leave. They'd already moved me out. That afternoon, I went into the study and opened the closet. I pulled out one cardboard box, just one. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't pack books. I packed documents, deeds, old photos, Aline's letters, the things that told the truth. I labeled the box in black marker, important, not to leave, to prepare. That evening, my phone buzzed, an email notification. Meeting invitation, trust review scheduled by Marissa Cole, attendees listed, Melissa, Derek, Janine, and me. I smiled for the first time in days. The invitations had gone out. They were already seated when I walked in. Melissa sat at the head of the conference table like she belonged there. Derek leaned back in his chair, ankle crossed over his knee, scrolling through his phone. Janine sat between them, hands folded neatly, wearing the expression she reserved for hospitals and funerals. I took the empty chair at the far end. No one said hello. The room smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. A long glass table reflected all of us back at ourselves, 4 versions of the same family, none of them matching. Melissa checked her watch. "So what's this about, Dad?" Marissa said it was routine. Before I could answer, the door opened. Calvin Romer stepped in, briefcase in hand. He didn't rush, he never did. He closed the door gently behind him, set his case on the table, and took a seat across from us. "Good morning," he said evenly. Melissa smiled tight. We're eager to get started. Calvin opened his briefcase and removed a thin folder. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. That sound small as it was shifted the air in the room. I'll be brief, he said. As of last Friday, the existing revocable trust executed in 2011 has been formally revoked. Derek let out a short laugh. Revoked, that's not how this works. Melissa smiled wider. Dad can't just, she stopped, because Calvin hadn't reacted. He simply slid a document forward, placing it in the center of the table. Janine leaned in first, her face drained of color. Melissa picked up the paper, skimmed it once, then again. A small laugh escaped her mouth, sharp and disbelieving. This is a joke, she said. Calvin met her eyes. It is not. Derek sat up straighter. You're saying the trust doesn't exist. I'm saying, Calvin replied calmly, that trust no longer exists. Silence fell heavy. Melissa's laugh faded, replaced by something tighter. Dad, I didn't answer. Calvin continued. Mr. Whitcomb was well within his legal rights. Competency was confirmed. All filings were notarized and recorded. Janine's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. So what now? She asked. Calvin reached back into his briefcase. There is, he said, sliding out another folder, an addendum. He placed it gently on the table and no one reached for it. Janine's voice dropped to a whisper like she was afraid the room itself might hear. What conditions? Calvin didn't answer right away. He adjusted his glasses and opened the folder slowly, deliberately, as if timing mattered. Melissa leaned forward, already scowling. Derek crossed his arms. The amended trust, Calvin said, redefines beneficiary status. Melissa let out a short, sharp laugh. You can't just rewrite family. I can rewrite documents, Calvin replied evenly. And that's what governs this. He turned the folder toward them. Any inheritance, he continued, is now contingent upon three factors: demonstrated respect for Mr. Whitcomb's autonomy, documented voluntary involvement in his care, and written consent for any change to his residence, medical treatment, or financial control. Derek blinked. So we have to ask him. Yes, Calvin said, and he has to agree. Janine's fingers tightened together. What if he's not able to? Then an independent medical evaluation and court oversight are required, Calvin replied. Not family discretion. The air shifted. Melissa straightened. So we're being tested now? No, Calvin said. You're being evaluated. Derek leaned forward. This is insane. You're turning us into employees. Calvin shook his head. No, employees are paid regardless of intent. This structure rewards conduct. Janine swallowed hard. So if we don't meet these conditions, distributions are suspended, Calvin said, indefinitely. Melissa pushed her chair back slightly, heat rising in her voice. This is manipulation. You're using money to punish us. I stayed quiet. You're controlling us, she continued, turning toward me. You're doing exactly what you accuse us of. Derek nodded. Mom would never have allowed this. That was when I leaned forward. Don't, I said. The word landed heavy. Three faces turned toward me, startled. Don't use your mother like that, I continued, my voice low but steady. She warned me about this moment. Melissa scoffed. That's not true. It is, I said. She told me you'd sound reasonable, that you'd call it help, and that you'd forget I was still here. Janine's eyes dropped to the table. For weeks, I went on, you talked around me, about me. You decided where I'd live, what I'd keep, what I'd lose. Derek opened his mouth. I raised my hand. You planned my absence before I'd even left the room, I said, and you never once asked what I wanted. Silence pressed in from all sides. This trust doesn't ask you to prove love, I said. It asks you to show respect. Melissa shook her head. You're rewriting the rules. No, I replied. I'm enforcing them. Calvin closed the folder gently. This trust, he said, protects Mr. Whitcomb's dignity. Participation is optional. Compliance is not. I leaned back in my chair. You wanted control, I said quietly. Now you want answers. No one spoke. And for the first time in that room, they understood something had shifted and it wasn't going back. My voice cracked on the first sentence. It surprised me. I hadn't planned on speaking again so soon, and I hadn't planned on that sound, the thin break right in the middle of my chest. I paused, cleared my throat, and felt something settle. Then my voice steadied. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said. I did it because I was disappearing in my own house. No one interrupted. I built that company from the ground up, I continued. I missed birthdays, I missed vacations, I worked weekends so you wouldn't have to worry about lights turning off or food running out. Derek shifted but stayed quiet. When the recession hit, I said, I cashed out my retirement to keep payroll going. When Melissa needed help with her first house, I didn't ask questions. When Janine wanted to change majors for the third time, I paid the tuition anyway. I looked at each of them. I buried your mother, I said, and then I went home to a house that echoed. Janine's lips trembled, and somewhere along the way, I went on, I stopped being your father and started being a problem to manage. Still no one spoke. You didn't ask how I was doing, I said. You asked how long I could last. You didn't ask what I wanted. You decided what was easier. I took a breath. Care isn't control, I said, and love doesn't erase someone to make room for convenience. The room felt heavy, like everyone was afraid to move. I protected myself because no one else was doing it, I finished. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I started loving myself enough not to disappear. Silence stretched, then Melissa stood, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. So that's it, she said, arms crossed. Either we play by your rules or we're cut off. Her eyes locked onto mine. Choose, she said, the door slammed first. Not hard enough to break anything, just loud enough to make a point. Melissa didn't look back. Her heels struck the tile in quick, sharp beats, each one carrying more anger than the last. Derek followed, jaw tight, keys already in his hand. Janine hesitated at the doorway, eyes flicking toward me like she might say something. She didn't. The second door closed softer, then the room was quiet, too quiet. I stayed seated, hands resting on the table, staring at the empty chairs where my children had just been. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't sinking either. It felt lighter. Calvin gathered his papers slowly, giving me space. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "It's done," he said. "Everything is filed, locked, they can't undo it." I nodded. "Thank you." He studied me for a moment. "You okay?" I considered the question. "I miss my wife," I said. Calvin's expression softened. He packed his briefcase and stood. "She'd be proud of you." After he left, I sat there a while longer, letting the quiet settle. I thought about Alina, her laugh, the way she always knew when something was coming before it arrived. At home that night, I poured a single glass of bourbon and stood by the window, watching the porch light flicker on. The house felt the same, but I didn't. Days passed. No calls, no texts. Then my phone buzzed, a voicemail from Derek, and this time his voice didn't sound confident at all. I knew something was wrong the moment I heard Derek's voice. Not angry, not sarcastic, panicked. "Dad," he said, breath tight, words rushed. I need to talk to you." I didn't answer right away. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in my hand, watching the late afternoon light stretch across the floor. "Go on," I said. "The bank froze the line of credit," he blurted. "They said something about the trust, about distributions being suspended. There it was, no concern about me, no apology, just pressure. I have contractors waiting," he continued. "Melissa's freaking out. You thought what?" I asked. Silence. "That this would all just work out," he said finally. I closed my eyes. "So this is about money," I said. He didn't deny it. "I'm in a bind," he admitted. "We all are." I took a slow breath. "I'm not reopening the trust," I said. His voice cracked. "Then what are we supposed to do?" "Figure it out," I replied, the same way I did. Another pause. "Is there anything you can do?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "I can have dinner with you. I can talk. I can listen. But not money," I finished. "Not control." He exhaled, long and shaky. "I don't know how we got here," he said. "I do," I replied. "And it doesn't have to end this way." We hung up without a plan, just a line left open. That evening I walked through the house, touching the door frames, the walls, the places where life had happened. I wasn't leaving, but I was seeing it clearly now. As owner, for the last time, I woke up in my own bed. Morning light filtered through the curtains Alina had picked years ago, the ones she said made the room feel warmer even in winter. The house was quiet, not empty, just still. The kind of quiet that listens back. I lay there for a moment, hand resting on the mattress, breathing it in. No nurses, no schedules, no one telling me where I needed to be. I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table where everything had started. The table didn't wobble. Neither did I over the next few weeks. I finished what I'd begun. With Calvin's help, I redirected portions of the trust. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Scholarships for trade students, community housing projects, a fund for seniors who needed help but didn't have families circling like vultures. The money went where dignity was respected. What remained stayed under my control. Melissa didn't call again. Janine sent a short email, careful, polite, distant. Derek showed up once unannounced, standing on the porch like a kid who didn't know if he was welcome inside. I made him coffee. We talked about weather and work and nothing important. That was enough for now. Family, I realized, isn't who demands a seat at your table, it's who waits to be invited. One afternoon, I cleaned out the study. Not everything, just the clutter. In the back of a drawer, I found the photo I'd been looking for. Alina and me sitting on the porch steps, her head on my shoulder, both of us squinting into the sun. Behind the frame was the note, the same one she'd written years ago. Choose dignity over guilt. I set the photo on my desk where I could see it every morning. I didn't lose my family. I lost the illusion that love means surrender. And what I kept, my home, my voice, my self-respect, was worth more than anything they tried to take. Because dignity isn't inherited, it's earned. And sometimes you earn it by standing your ground even when it hurts. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about truth, family, and standing your ground.